have a little bit of a background histoire about how I came to meet Simon. I had been living overseas for over 20 years, came back to Australia, and of course you have to set everything up, including things like computers, and I don't know anything about computers, but someone said to me, look, there's this bloke down in McLaren Vale, he's really, really good, and he's not expensive, but if we're in a hurry, could be a problem because he's in a wheelchair, and sometimes for days or weeks he's not functioning very well. But anyway, I thought, that's fine, I want to support this person, so I met Simon, got all my computers set up. That was in 2005. At the end of 2005, beginning of 2006, I went to the Netherlands and took intensive courses in Samasatti light therapy. And I came back armed with my little box of lights and head full of theory and no experience. This guy with MS, I can practice on him. So I didn't ring or say, would that be okay? Because then he would say no. How intrusive, go away, horrible woman. I just rocked up to his door and said, hello, would it be okay if I practiced on you? And of course his instinct was to say, no, it wouldn't be okay, would you please go away? But he was far too polite to do that. So there ensued about 8 months where I treated him twice a week in the beginning, and then once a week, and then every second week. And that was for me the most learning that I have had as a light therapist, because I had the protocols, but the energy and the body were saying different things, and I learnt from what the body told me and the wonderful feedback that Simon would give me as to what he was feeling and how he was reacting emotionally, physically, in every way. And over this period, he got out of the wheelchair a lot more, and a lot of things that hadn't been working very well started to work much more normally. Of course, it was not just light therapy. He was doing all kinds of things. He has his own website, Walking with MS. He was looking into phenylalanine and additives and dietary things, ways it could help. 2007, in February, Jan and Wilma from the Netherlands came out to give an intensive course in basic Samasatti light therapy. And I said to Simon, well, you have to take it. Well, again, he said, no, I don't. No, it was really very challenging because even though he was improved, the thought of having to get up and be somewhere at 9 o'clock in the morning was difficult, but he had to climb up and down stairs 4 times a day was difficult, and that his energy was being depleted. It was all a challenge, but he was too polite to say no. And it carried on. He took various courses and things. He went from being, and we'll probably tell you how it happened, from being a reluctant, accidental light therapist to being Australia's Samasatti guru. So I'm very, very happy that he's with us.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Listen, if all those people from Adelaide, if you've heard any of these stories before, if you do nod off, just don't snore. That's actually what I say to some of my clients nowadays. Okay, so Samasatti light therapy, this is pretty well covering it. Samasatti light therapy is about a conversation between the therapist and the client. It's not just a conversation through words, how are you feeling, what are you experiencing right now, but the other things that come out incidentally. As you apply lights, you might notice a foot twitch or a hand twitch, or the conversation changes. Each one of these is a signal. Each one of these is their body communicating with mine, and something happens through that. As Lynn said, she was my enabler. I think she's been many people's enabler. Clearly hearing today how the ALA has started, she's helped enable that. She helped me not only with the encouragement to look at light therapy, but she also helped me financially, because I was not in a position to go to courses. They were quite expensive. She's always been there for me. She's helped me with advice, being a sounding board. And she's always been impartial. So yes, I owe her a lot. My first experience after doing the basic course with lights was something that happened by sheer accident. My now son-in-law, his brother Mark, and his wife Carly had a baby that was 4 weeks premature. They had tried to put a cannula into this baby's hand, which is unusual to say the least. Normally they do it in the top of the head, but they figured this baby was old enough. And they made a mistake, and the cannula pierced the vein that they were going into. And the blood flooded into the hand, and you can see that the bruising here, which is the remnants of it, as it was draining away. What then happened is that they noticed that the two digits there, the thumb and the index finger, had blood pooled at the end. They'd gone necrotic. This is not unusual when this happens. It would happen to say 10% of the time, if you're unlucky. Usually it clears up within a day or two. This one hadn't. This one had been like this for about a week. 5 days. And they were worried. They said to the paediatrician, what's going to happen here? And he said, well, it's necrotic. So that means it's dead. So it'll either drop off in time, or if it doesn't, we'll amputate. That was their result. That was their feeling too, and that was their reaction. Now, Campbell, my son-in-law, had already talked to them about the fact that I was doing this light therapy stuff, whatever that was. And they said, do you think Simon would have a look at Mason? Do you think he would do something for us? And so Campbell spoke to me, and I said, look, I've got no idea. I had no idea. I mean, it's not as if it was a protocol I could follow. There was nothing going to back me up here. What was I going to do? I thought, I've got the lights, and Lynn had lent me some of her lights, and I thought, okay, I'll give it a go. But I said, look, don't hold out any hope. I said, look, I've got no idea what I'm doing. So just another shot of it there. So I went in, and that's Carly, and there's Mason. And I went in, I started using these little torches on the finger. And the first colour I used, because I didn't know where to start, so I started at the beginning of the rainbow, started with a red. I used red on his finger. Well, his reaction astounded me. Pulled his hand away, as if he was an older child. This child's 4 week prem, he's got a nasogastric tube. He pulled his hand away. I thought, oh, didn't like that. Okay, better not use that one again. So I didn't. And I kept using different colours. Some colours he would fall asleep with. And I've in later years discovered, when I was treating my daughter after having her child, I had a pink, the baby was upset and disturbed. So I used a pink light shone at the ceiling, peach pink, and the baby fell asleep. So I left it on while I was treating her after she'd had this baby. When we'd finished the treatment, I switched off the pink light and the baby woke up. So there you are. If you can't get them to sleep, peach pink's wonderful. So I continued working with Mason twice a week, maybe 3 times a week sometimes, but it was difficult because when I went to the hospital, I had to get my mobility scooter out of the car and park miles away, get all the way up to the hospital. When I was in the hospital working with him, the nurses had to shadow me, and they had Mason's notes, and they wrote down everything I was doing. It was during the course of this I noticed something myself. I never usually held Mason's hand. I would have my torch in one hand and I would have my other hand behind it. And I noticed that I could actually feel something on my hand. And it's not till after this, that I realised what I was actually feeling is an echo of what he was feeling. So this gave me some guidance as to what was going on inside the finger. And I noticed that the lights at the lower frequencies, so the reds, orange, yellows, they were actually stirring things up. The blue calmed it right down. After a few weeks of treating him, he went home. I treated him a couple of times at his house, and sometimes I had Annalise to help me because he was getting a bit shirty with these lights. He was onto it now. He's a little bit older. I don't know who you are. You keep holding my hand. Leave me alone. Carly phoned me up one evening and said, Simon, the end of his finger's beginning to bleed. And I said, okay, just put a glove on him or a sock on his hand so it doesn't mess up the quilt or anything, or it doesn't catch on anything. Next morning she phoned me up. She said, Simon, the black bits have all come off and there's finger underneath. And that was it. You can see there's a bit of malformation at the end there. The thumb is totally clear. After that, I continued the treatment because it was still having an effect. Now, when I saw this, I couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe it. They were very happy, of course. That's the end of the fingers obviously not there, so the nail bed has curled around a bit. So, what's happened now is Mason's 8 years old? 9? So that was 9 years ago, and the finger is almost discernible from his other fingers. So I guess what I'm saying is, one of the things I've discovered when treating people, if you leave an injury for too long, the body is very good at adapting and saying, that's fine, we can live with this. So you might have people with frozen shoulder, and it's frozen because we can live with this. With Mason, he had been with that injury for long enough for the body to say, that's okay, we can live with this. When I used the red, I stirred it up so much that it was like a brand new injury. Once that happened, then the actual healing could happen. Because you're reprogramming those cells to say, oh, hang on, there is something wrong here. Maybe we can't live with this. Let's do something about it. Now, this is my interpretation. I've not based any of this on science, but just on anecdotal evidence. Okay, light in education. This, I'm having an awful feeling I'm out of order here. I might just leave that for a bit. Okay. Okay. So when I treat somebody, especially in the early days, I treat injuries because it's something I can see, something that's measurable. So when I'm doing that, we can treat for viruses or bacteria. We can support the immune system through a protocol. With sports injuries, especially if it's a sports injury without repetition, I'll explain that in a second. Sports injuries, so for instance, if a person comes for treatment, especially things that can't be treated by allopathic medicine, like shin splints, happens to netballers and basketballers, some of the footballers that my children know. they have this tremendous pain. Everyone knows what shin splints are? Yeah? No? Yeah, okay. So in the treatment for that, I would often use a red to start off with, and people would complain about the ache. Once they do that, I know it's become fresh again. So it's not something that happened yesterday or the day before, it's right now. And the body thinks, oh, this is sore. If they come to me and it's really inflamed and really sore, I won't use red. I'll use blue. And then I'll use green. I then use the crystal. I use a crystal. I'll explain that later. After about 20 minutes, the pain has gone, and it doesn't recur unless they re-injure it. I always thought, because I had one girl come and see me for treatment, and she had been playing basketball on the Wednesday. She had a netball grand final on the Friday, and she saw me on the Thursday and said, can you do something for me with this? And I said, look, we'll try, but I said, I can't guarantee anything. I said, your body might need a bit more time to recover. So I produced the torches and did what I was supposed to do. The body took the light on and did what it had to do, and she left without pain. She said, will this hurt me tomorrow? I said, I don't know. Let me know. She played her grand final on the Friday, or on the Saturday, and I said, how's your legs? She said, no problems at all. It's just remarkable how the body has taken that light, has done what it needs to do with it, and has healed itself. I can hardly say I've done it to them. All I've done is provide the catalyst, provide the means for the body to do what it has to do. If I was treating another young lady who came to me with shin splints, and she was a sprinter. And when I put on the blue light, absolutely nothing happened. And I got to the end of the treatment, and she still had the pain. So I questioned what I was doing, and I tried turquoise instead of blue. When I did that, she felt something. Now, turquoise, I happen to know, is often used when there's an emotional side to the injury. And in her case, this was the case. And I said to her, are you scared about running? She said, no, I'm just scared of losing. So I suddenly thought, do you think, I said, your legs are hurting you because it gives you an excuse? So that if you don't win, then it's not because you're a bad runner or slow, but because you've got this pain in your leg. And she started crying. Now, all sorts of other things have happened, and she's never had that recurrence of pain because she now knows where it came from. Same sort of thing happens with some of the footballers who come to me after a knee reconstruction. They have lost their confidence in that knee. Even though the reconstruction went well, and the doctors have said, you're fine, everything's good, the thing they have to get over is that this knee let them down. Is it going to let me down again? Especially with fear of rejection, which of course is always present, even though it's your own tendons you're using. So that really needs to be dealt with. Okay, depression of the elderly. Physical injuries like broken bones, tripping, is there an element of repetition? this has nothing to do with light therapy, but one of my daughter, our second daughter, she went through a period when she was much, much younger of always breaking a bone. And in one particular year, I think she broke a bone, different bones, 3 times. 4 times. And it was an absolute nightmare. And we took her to the GP, and the GP said, look, Emily, why do you keep doing this? She said, I don't know, I just don't know. He said, look, I tell you what, this next year, because it's at the end of the year, this next year, I want you to make a conscious effort to not break any bones. And do you know what? She never has, ever since then. And she was that big. She's now this big, and a mum of 2 children. I had a lady came to see me, and she had a broken bone, a broken arm. And she said it was aching like crazy. Could I help? Somebody had actually sent her to me. I think it might have been Lynn. She did the craniofacial stuff.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And so she saw me, and I said, and I was treating her. Now, one of the things you can do with lights, you don't actually have to put it on the spot, because if you've got a dirty great cast on there, the light's not going to get through. You can put it down here, and the light will go where it needs to go to, because the body's clever like that. With her, I started shining green on it. I probably started with red. I then shone green. Green's the colour that the body loves for healing. Red stirs everything up. Blue puts it to sleep. The green actually does the healing. It invigorates the nerves. I used a crystal with her as well, because the crystal can work straight through the cast. The crystal works, it's Greek for frozen light. The crystal is like a shotgun, where the light is like a sniper. It's very specific. The crystal isn't. I don't use crystals on children. They don't like it. So with her, I was using the crystal, and she started crying. I said, what's the problem? She said, you know, I broke this arm while I was dancing. I said, that's terrible. Tell me about it. She said, I was dancing at a friend's birthday party. I said, okay. Why was that sad? And she said, because, she said, I've broken this arm 3 times in my life. The first time was when I was 7 or 8, and we weren't allowed to dance. And I was dancing in my bedroom, and I fell over and broke my arm. But I told my mum I fell off the chair, because I didn't want to tell her I'd been dancing. I said, okay. What was the next time you broke your arm? The next time, she said, was when I was married, and I went out with some friends, and we were at a party, or one of the friends' weddings or something, and she said I was dancing again then, and fell over, tripped, and I broke my arm. My husband found out, and he was furious, because we're not allowed to dance. And she said, now I've left my husband, and because I left my husband, had to leave my family. And she said, I'm on my own, and my friends took me out dancing to a party, and I broke it again. And she said, I think maybe it's like a curse. I think maybe you need to forgive yourself. What do you think? Because I said, this is not happening because anything's at you. It's because you are feeling that you shouldn't be doing what you're doing, but you want to do it anyway. So she took that on board. I've not seen her since. I don't think she's broken anything else as far as I know. One of the things we often do is we use the acupuncture meridians as a superhighway. So if we're treating somebody for colds, we have a protocol for that which uses the acupuncture points, several acupuncture points, with different coloured lights. So instead of using a needle, we'll use a different coloured light. Now I'm not sure, I have no idea how acupuncture works and why the needle being put onto a specific point stimulates it. But I know that the lights and different coloured lights do have different reactions on those different points. If I'm treating somebody with Meniere's, I will use the same acupuncture protocol that an acupuncturist would use. But I would use different colours on different sides of the body, because does everybody know how acupuncture works? Yeah, you've all heard about it. So most meridians, there's two lines on the left and the right side. Conception vessel and the governing vessel, the only two that you've got one line. As far as Samasatti is concerned, we're looking for balance. So the left and the right need to be in balance with each other, the yin and the yang. And I will find out from the body of the client which side is deficit and which side is dominant. We can do nothing about a dominance because energy is energy, it'll be where it'll be, but we can do something about a deficit. So we'll bring that up. And as we do this, there are specific changes that come across the person. Now, Meniere's is a great one because Meniere's is an imbalance. Does everybody know about Meniere's? Inner ear stuff. So as I treat that person, they start to feel ears popping and things moving, and a balance comes about by the time we've finished. I had someone came to me one time with, I can't remember what on earth she came to me for, but one of the things that came out was that she had this pain in the middle of her buttock on the left-hand side. And she'd had this pain. She said, it's excruciating. Quite often, she said, it makes me limp. I've got no power in that leg. And she said, I don't know what it is. I've been to see chiropractors, I've been to physio, I've been to the doctor, and I've been to all these other people. They can't work it out. And I thought, I'd just been reading up on it that week. There are two meridians that cross over in the middle of the buttock. And there's a point down on the ankle which helps to balance those two meridians out. And I used it. I put green on there. It was like turning off a light switch. It stopped. Again, I was blown away. Absolutely shocked. And she said, it's gone. I said, okay, stand up. She was on the bed. Stand up and just see how you feel. She said, it's gone. I've never seen her again. Okay, so if there's an element of repetition in the thing, in the accident or whatever, tell the story. Find out what the story is. See what this is trying to say. Someone came to me a little while ago to tell me about a problem he had, or he was having difficulty with a problem in his town. He was on the school council of his local school, and he was being bullied. This man would have been about 55. And he believed that they should be doing this and that and something else. And they laughed at him and told him it's absolute nonsense. Of course they're not going to. For him, I was shining the light on his chakras. And this story came out as I moved from the base chakra up to the solar plexus. And as I moved the light further out from him, more story came out. I said, has this happened to you before? He said, at work. He said, I had to leave work under stress pay because people were at me all the time telling me my work was no good, telling me that this and telling me that something or other else, and it really affected me. Again, he was being bullied. I said, any other times? And I moved the light further out. He said, yeah. He said, it happened when I was at school. I was bullied. He said, I've always been a bit of a big man, and people used to call me fatty and call me four eyes because I wore glasses. And he said, it just continues. I said, okay. For me, I saw this as more than just a repetition of behaviours and how he handles it. I mean, it was that. But for me, I saw this as karmic. This is a life lesson. This is something his cells have carried through, or his persona, or whatever it is, from somewhere else. And it's something that needs to be handled. When dealing with most chronic diseases, it belongs somewhere. It's come from somewhere. When I first got MS, I got very depressed. The MS travelled very, very quickly, and within a few months I was in a wheelchair for a lot of time. My moods had changed. I didn't have very strong legs. I couldn't walk far. I was normally really active, vibrant sort of person, and that had gone. We had 4 children. It all came down onto Annalise. It threatened our marriage. I remember one time Annalise was at work. This is during the closing moments of me being a teacher, and I'd gone to pick our child up, our youngest, from childcare, brought him home, and I sat in the wheelchair in the front room and I just started crying. He climbed up onto the wheelchair. He would have been about 3, and he just sat there patting me on my back. It made me cry harder. In my early days of teaching, early-ish days of teaching back in the 80s, early 80s, I moved from teaching at Penola in the southeast of South Australia to up in near Adelaide, where we actually met. When I was first taking the class, someone said to me, oh look, just watch Matthew, will you? Because Matthew is a troublemaker. He's got a hare lip. Now, as soon as you start to tell him off, he's going to say, you're saying this to me because I've got a hare lip, aren't you? You're picking on me. So, as always, I forgot all about that. Because I'm a man, and because I'm fairly large, and I've got a big voice, through my teaching career, most of my teaching career with children, I was given children who were difficult. All right? Because they wanted me to dominate them, they wanted me to get control of them and rip them back into gear. So I had a habit of ignoring any advice previous teachers had to give me, because I felt it didn't put those children on a level playing field. When I was at school, I would walk into a classroom thinking, right, this is going to be a great year. And I'd walk in, sit down halfway down the back of the class, and the teacher would come in and he'd go through the roll. Oh, Hansen, heard about you, up the front here. I thought, oh, here we go again. It's going to be on for young and old. I was not going to do that in my classrooms. So, we started the term off. Everything was great. Matthew was sitting in his place. Everything was wonderful. Second term came along. Matthew, chat. Okay, Matthew, now get on with your work. Matthew, chat. Matthew, get on with your... You're just having a go at me because I've got a hare lip. I said, how dare you use God's gift to you as a threat against me? Where that came from, I have no idea. But it closed his mouth. Oh, he went home that night and he spoke to his mum. He said, "Mum, Mr. Hansen said to me that this is a gift from God and I'm not to use it as a weapon." And she said, "Did he? What do you think he means by that?" "I don't know. What does he mean?" "You better go and see him tomorrow." Okay, so next day comes along and he came in to me. My classroom was always open at 8:30. We started at 10 to 9. But just for kids to come and have a chat if they wanted to. I had one particular girl who really needed a chat in the morning. Then she would be great for the rest of the day. Anyway, he came in and chatted to me the next morning. He said, "Mr. Hansen, what did you mean by that?" I said, "Okay, how many people in this school of 650 children have got a hair lip?" Well, he said, "None." "See? What did I say? It's a gift." Okay. He went home, told his mum. His mum said, "Oh, really? Is that what he said? What do you think he means by that?" "I don't know. Maybe you need to go and speak to him." Next day comes along. "Mr. Hansen, how is it a gift just because no one else has got it?" I said, "Look, if everybody had it, you'd all be the same, right?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Because they haven't, this gift of yours is for you to show them what it can do." So he went and told his mum, cutting it short. Next day, "Mr. Hansen, what can it do?" I said, "That's your challenge. What can it do and what can you do with it to help other people?" So I was pretty chuffed. School interviews came along and parents sort of said, "Oh, you're terrific, Mr. Hansen, how wonderful you are. You've turned him round, he's not got this chip on his shoulder any longer." I said, "Great." Here I was, sitting at home, depressed, wheels falling off the wagon, left, right and centre. Didn't know where I was going, couldn't teach anymore. 4 children and a wife. I was depressed. Do you know what went through my head? This is your gift. What are you going to do with it? I hated that voice. With a passion. So it's really important to find out what this is with us for. It's really important to get to the bottom of where's the pattern here? What's a gift? What's not a gift? So for instance, if I didn't have MS, I wouldn't be standing here. If I didn't have MS, I wouldn't know the things I know. I wouldn't have met the people I've met. I'd have no idea about energy medicine. I'd have no idea about the interconnectedness of us all. Some people I've tried to help, especially people with cancer, have not survived. They've not lived. Was it a failure? No. In each of the cases, we got to the bottom of why they got the cancer in the first place. Has everybody here heard about Ian Gawler?
Yes.
Right. Ian Gawler will tell you that Western medicine can get rid of a lot of cancers. But a lot of those cancers that they can get rid of will come back in 5 years if nothing else has changed, if the environment stays the same. This is the same with MS and any other chronic disease. How much time have I got? 10 is okay. I really want to tell you this other story. This really highlights, I think, some of the power of this stuff. There's a lady who came to see me with insomnia and fibromyalgia. I've never met anybody with insomnia before to this degree. She slept for only 1 to 2 hours a night and has been doing it for 20 years. She said during the day she's not tired, but she gets a bit bored at night time. I ran through with her a couple of protocols, supporting the immune system, harmonisation 1, which is similar to a chakra balance, alternating with toxin clearing. We did this for a couple of weeks and things were just ticking along. When we were working with her chakras at one stage, she suddenly started crying. I said, "What are you seeing at the moment?" And she said, "I've just remembered my baby that died." And she told me her story. She said, "My first child," hang on, we were trying hard to get pregnant with our first child, and we had been trying for 5 years. And finally I got pregnant. And I'd gone full term. The doctor wanted me to continue on with the pregnancy and not induce me. And she went about 10 days after full term. When she had the baby, it was stillborn, and they said it had starved to death. They told her this. Now, whether this is what she remembers or it's fact, I just don't know. That's not relevant. The relevance is that this is what she's carrying with her. And she said, "I was so, so sad." Now, she said, after this, they wouldn't let me see the baby. She said, "No, you don't want to see the baby. It's okay, you don't want to see the baby." So she wasn't allowed to see the baby. She wasn't allowed to give it a name. And she had to just go away and get on with things. She had her first child live born, a young boy, 10 months later, 11 months later, very, very quickly. Very quickly. I couldn't believe it. And incidentally, the next child that she had was 5 years after that because she couldn't get pregnant. Now, her son, she says, she's very close to him. And she said, he's this 6'4" bloke, dreadlocks, right into his music, an electrician, but she said he is as gentle as they come. She said, even though I see him as my son, he sometimes feels like a daughter. She said, "I'm sure my baby's spirit is inside him." I said, "It could be." And during the course of this, as this conversation is going along, I'm putting lights on different parts of her body, and the conversation deepens or flips or changes. If it changes, I move the light back to where it was before. She's not aware of what I'm doing. She can see it if she wants to, but she's not consciously aware of it. I'm not trying to force memories here. I'm trying to keep up a dialogue. And it's not just a dialogue between me and her anymore. It's now a dialogue between her and her. It's a dialogue between her memory and her present, so that she can relive it and unlock those memories so she's not hanging on to them anymore. Because it's those that's going to stop her from going to sleep. She doesn't want to see them again. She's avoiding them. So we moved along and I said, "Okay, have you ever given your baby a name?" She said, "No." I said, "Okay, think about that." She went away, came back, and in fact came back 2 sessions later and she said, "I've given my baby a name." I said, "Really?" "Yes," she said, "Lily." So I said, "That's wonderful." So we moved on. Then, by the way, she's now sleeping 6 hours a night. And her fibromyalgia is totally under control, hardly ever hurts her, unless there's huge weather differences, hot and cold. She came to me the following time and she said, Simon, I've got to tell you a story. And she started tearing up. She said, the other day I bought my granddaughter, her son's daughter, a present, a doll. Normally when she gets a doll, she calls it Whitey because it's wearing a white smock, or Bluey because it's wearing a blue jumper. But she said, I didn't want to call it that this time. So I said to her, look, I'm going to give you this doll, is that okay? She said, yeah. And she said, can I give it a name? And the little girl said, yes. She said, how about we call it Lily? She said, oh, it's a nice name, Grandma. Okay. Now, that night, she couldn't sleep. And she knew her son was up, so she started sending him text messages. And she told her son what she'd done. And she said, is that okay? He said, of course that's all right. She shared all of this with him, all about the baby who had died. And he said to her, Mum, I think it's lovely. I'm really pleased you did that. 2 days later, he brought his daughter round to see Grandma. And they had a pot plant. And he said to his mum, we've been shopping for plants. Yes, look what we've got, Nanny. And do you know what it is, Nanny? It's a lily pilly. The following week, I was listening to the radio and discovered that the fruit of a lily pilly is a new superfood. It's grown in Queensland. It has a little berry on it which is called a newberry, something like that. And they're using this berry in Europe and England to make gourmet sauces for their foods. It's not yet known about in Australia, but they want to make it so because its efficacious properties are enormous for anti-inflammatory and all that sort of stuff. So I told her about this, and I said, now here's the story. And I said, between you and me, I do not believe in coincidence. It's a great path to be walking, is it not? Thank you very much.
I was thinking you might want to show people lights and how we use
Oh, yeah.
where on the body and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, how far.
Okay.
The type of light technology you use, because there's several of them.
The technology, yeah.
Sorry, can you say that?
What light? You said you use this little torch? Or
Yeah. So, look,
more specific?
I'm using an LED.
Yes.
All right, I won't shine it at you, it's quite bright. The intensity of the light makes no difference. All right? This is a new battery, so it's bright. If it's a flatter battery, it doesn't matter. So, I mean, I hear people saying, oh, you have to use lasers and this sort of stuff. And some people believe you have to put the person into the dark room for 15 minutes before you actually pull the lights out. I've not experimented, but I've not found it to be any different. Listen, if I put a light on and I shine it onto somebody and I feel nothing out the other end, I'll say, are you feeling anything here? And if they say no, it's probably the wrong colour. However, having said that, with my son, my eldest son, if I can put the light on him, he's more than likely going to feel something and have an immediate reaction. My youngest son, nothing at all. With the crystal, most people will feel something with the crystal as it's like a shotgun.
You mean quartz when you say crystal? Quartz crystal.
Yeah, quartz crystal.
And do you shine the light through the crystal or just use it?
Explain about the lens too.
Yeah. You can, some people do shine it through the crystal. I'm not wholly convinced that's a good idea. All right, I think they're both dealing with vibration, and I think if you start mixing vibration, you're not sure what you've got at the end. You know what I mean? It's yeah.
So in other words, when you use a crystal, you just place the crystal on a particular point. Is that what you mean?
No, I actually hold the. My aunt introduced me to the crystal many years ago. probably about 32 years ago. She was taught by Marcel Vogel from the United States. And I'd crushed my thumb in a bit of a nasty accident with a tree. And it was all fixed up and microsurgeried. And the nail bed was so damaged that the nail started growing back here. Okay? The blood supply was compromised, as were the nerves. So in winter time, my finger would just crack and bleed. And she said to me, it's a blasting nuisance really, and she said to me, do you want me to try and use the crystal on it? So she took her crystal out and started moving it around. The pain shot straight up my arm. I couldn't believe it. And she would have done this maybe 3 times over the course of 12 months.
So at a distance to the body,
No, well, this close.
Okay.
This close. And she would wave it around in clockwise motion, just to stimulate. The result is I've got my nail back. And it's slightly larger than the other one, but it's there, you know. Now this sort of stuff you can't argue with. It is. Where was I going? So, when I'm using the crystal, I feel an echo of what happens to the person. So if I'm treating someone with a headache, I can run the crystal through here, put my other hand at the back, and I will feel the vibration back here. If it's prickling me, I'll ask them what they're feeling. Or if it's hot, I'll ask them what they're feeling. And they might not be feeling exactly what I'm feeling, but they're feeling something. If the body doesn't want it or doesn't need it, I will stop feeling anything. Okay? And I found it's the same with the lights. Now these lights are dichromatic. The lenses are dichromatic. So they're built up. So you can you see that that's sort of a bit like a mirror if I hold it to one side? Yeah? They build the lenses up using 2 other filters to create the accuracy that they've got with the light. So here I've got green and red. Now they're opposite colours, so when you shine them at the same intensity, they should come out white. They aren't because the green's more intense. Yeah. Yeah, it's not really good. There you go. Blow that out of the water. So it's a question of the accuracy of the frequency that we're talking about and the stimulation that does. Does that help? Okay. Thank you.